The sound of sizzling burgers and children's laughter filled the warm afternoon air at Riverside Community Park. But the festive atmosphere shattered in an instant when Officer Patricia Hendricks slammed Colonel Marcus Ellis against the picnic table. Her knee pressed into his back as families watched in stunned silence. "Stay down," she barked, her voice cutting through the sudden hush like a blade through silk. "You're under arrest for disturbing the peace and threatening behavior." Moments earlier, Colonel Ellis had been flipping hamburgers at the Charity Grill station, his crisp white polo shirt emblazoned with the Veterans Community Outreach logo, sweat beading on his forehead as he served the steady stream of neighbors who'd come to support the local food bank fundraiser. His deep laugh had echoed across the park as he joked with the children waiting in line. His decorated military bearing softened by the genuine warmth in his eyes when he handed each child their burger with a smile. At 42, Marcus Ellis carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd earned his stripes through 2 decades of military service, including 3 tours in Afghanistan and a Purple Heart that rested in a shadow box on his living room mantel. His uniform may have been traded for civilian clothes, but his commitment to service remained unwavering. Every Saturday for the past 6 months, he'd volunteered at community events across the city, using his pension to buy extra supplies and his time to mentor young veterans struggling with their transition to civilian life. The trouble began when Officer Hendricks arrived at the park in her HOA enforcement vehicle, her clipboard clutched in her manicured hands and her pale blue eyes scanning the crowd with predatory intensity. As the newly appointed Community Standards Officer for the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association, she'd made it her mission to maintain what she called neighborhood integrity through aggressive enforcement of regulations that seemed to multiply weekly. Her presence alone was enough to dampen the spirits of any gathering, but today she seemed particularly agitated. "Excuse me," she called out sharply, her heels clicking against the concrete as she approached the grill station where Marcus stood serving lunch to a group of elderly residents. "Sir, you need to move away from the food service area immediately. This is a restricted zone for authorized personnel only." Marcus looked up from the grill. His spatula paused mid-flip. Confusion etched across his features. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm one of the volunteers. I've been here since 7 this morning setting up." He gestured toward the bright yellow volunteer badge pinned to his shirt and the official event t-shirt draped over his shoulder. "Is there something I can help you with?" Hendricks's mouth twisted into a sneer as she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper that only Marcus could hear. "I don't care what little badge you're wearing or what sob story you've got. You're making people uncomfortable with your presence. Look around you. Families are keeping their children away from this area because of you." The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow, and he glanced around the bustling park to see children playing freely, parents chatting with neighbors, and elderly couples sharing meals at nearby tables. The atmosphere was relaxed and joyful, with no sign of the discomfort Hendricks described. His jaw tightened as he recognized the familiar sting of prejudice wrapped in official authority. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "I'm Colonel Marcus Ellis, and I've been volunteering with Veterans Community Outreach for 6 months. The event coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, personally asked me to help with the grill today. If you'd like to speak with her." "I don't need to speak with anyone," Hendricks interrupted, her voice rising to a volume that began drawing curious glances from nearby families. "I can see exactly what's happening here. You're trying to intimidate people with your military rank and your aggressive demeanor. Well, it won't work on me. I've dealt with your type before." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke, and Marcus felt the familiar weight of injustice settle on his shoulders. He'd faced enemy fire in the mountains of Afghanistan, led men through impossible missions, and earned the respect of generals and enlisted soldiers alike. But here, in a peaceful community park, where he'd volunteered his time and money to help neighbors in need, he was being treated like a criminal by a woman who wielded her clipboard like a weapon. "Officer Hendricks," Marcus said carefully, reading her name tag. "I understand you have a job to do, but I'm not causing any problems here. I'm just trying to help serve lunch to folks who need it. If you have specific concerns about the event, I'm happy to get the coordinator to address them with you." Instead of responding to his reasonable offer, Hendricks reached for the radio clipped to her belt, her fingers trembling with what appeared to be rage. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hendricks at Riverside Community Park. I need backup for a situation involving an uncooperative individual who's refusing to comply with lawful orders. Suspect is a large black male, approximately 6 feet tall, exhibiting threatening behavior toward families and children." The radio crackled to life with the dispatcher's voice, confirming backup was en route, and Marcus felt his world tilt off its axis. Around him, conversations had stopped as people turned to stare at the unfolding drama. Children who'd been laughing moments before now clung to their parents' legs, confused by the sudden tension that had descended on their peaceful afternoon. "Ma'am, please," Marcus said, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "There's no need for backup. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just trying to volunteer at a charity event. You can check with Mrs. Patterson. You can see my volunteer credentials. You can—" "Stop talking," Hendricks screamed, her composure completely shattered as she pointed an accusing finger at his chest. "Stop trying to manipulate me with your smooth words and your fake credentials. I know exactly what you are. You're a con artist who preys on the kindness of good people. You probably don't even have any military background. You're just another thug in a nice shirt." The accusation was so outrageous, so completely divorced from reality, that Marcus almost laughed. But the laughter died in his throat as he saw the genuine fear and hatred in Hendricks's eyes. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a power trip. This was something deeper and more dangerous. This was prejudice in its purest form, immune to reason or evidence. "Officer Hendricks," he said slowly, his military training kicking in as he assessed the situation like a tactical problem. "I think we need to take a step back here. I'm going to reach into my pocket very slowly to get my military ID, and then we can clear this up." "Don't you dare reach for anything!" Hendricks shrieked, and before Marcus could react, she lunged forward and shoved him hard in the chest. The force of the unexpected attack sent him stumbling backward into the picnic table, his hip connecting with the corner in a burst of pain that made him grunt involuntarily. The sound of that grunt, torn from his lips by the impact, seemed to trigger something primal in Hendricks. She pounced on him like a wild animal, her clipboard forgotten as she grabbed his arm and tried to twist it behind his back. "You're under arrest for assaulting an officer," she screamed, spittle flying from her lips as she struggled to maintain her grip on his much larger frame. Marcus's military training warred with his civilian instincts as he found himself in an impossible situation. He could easily overpower Hendricks. His years of combat experience and physical conditioning made her amateur wrestling attempts laughable. But he knew that any physical resistance would only make the situation worse. Instead, he went limp, allowing her to force him face down against the picnic table while trying to ignore the sharp pain in his ribs where the table edge had caught him. "This is insane!" he gasped, his cheek pressed against the rough wood of the table as Hendricks fumbled with plastic zip ties, clearly having no real experience with actual arrests. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a volunteer at a charity event. Someone please call Mrs. Patterson. She'll verify who I am." The crowd that had gathered around the confrontation murmured uncertainly, caught between their desire to help and their fear of getting involved in what appeared to be an official police action. Phones appeared in hands like magic, some recording the scene, while others frantically dialed numbers. Children began crying, their parents scooping them up and backing away from the violence they didn't understand. It was then that the calm, clear voice cut through the chaos like a laser through smoke. "Officer Hendricks, step away from my husband immediately and explain exactly what you think you're doing." Every head turned toward the source of the voice, and Marcus felt his heart leap with both relief and dread as he saw his wife, Diana Ellis, striding across the park toward them. She moved with the purposeful grace of a woman accustomed to commanding attention in courtrooms and boardrooms, her dark hair pulled back in the professional chignon she wore for work, her crisp navy suit and sensible heels marking her as someone who belonged in the corridors of power rather than at a community barbecue. Diana Ellis had been shopping for groceries when she'd received the frantic call from Mrs. Patterson, who'd witnessed the confrontation from across the park and recognized Marcus's wife from previous community events. Racing to the scene, Diana had arrived just in time to see Hendricks attempting to zip-tie her husband's wrists while he lay prone against the picnic table, his face etched with pain and humiliation. At 38, Diana had spent the last 12 years climbing the ranks of the city's legal department, earning a reputation as one of the most formidable prosecutors in the state before accepting her current position as chief legal counsel for the city. Her office handled everything from contract disputes to civil rights violations, and she'd prosecuted more than her share of cases involving abuse of authority by public officials. Hendricks looked up from her struggle with the zip ties, her face flushed with exertion and anger. "Ma'am, you need to step back. This is an official arrest of a dangerous individual who was threatening families and children." "I don't know who you are, but I'm Diana Ellis, Chief Legal Counsel for the City of Riverside," Diana said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent years in courtrooms facing down hostile witnesses and recalcitrant defendants. "The man you're assaulting is my husband, Colonel Marcus Ellis, a decorated veteran who's volunteering at this charity event. Now step away from him immediately before you make this situation any worse for yourself." The color drained from Hendricks's face as the implications of Diana's words sank in, but her grip on Marcus's arm only tightened. "I don't care who you claim to be," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Your husband was threatening people, and I'm arresting him for public safety. If you interfere with this arrest, you'll be charged as well." Diana's eyes narrowed as she pulled out her phone and began recording the scene, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Officer Hendricks, you are currently engaged in what appears to be false imprisonment and assault under color of authority. You have no legal jurisdiction to make arrests, as you're employed by the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association, not the City Police Department. You are also in violation of Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act by depriving my husband of his constitutional rights." The legal terminology hit Hendricks like physical blows, each citation stripping away another layer of her false authority. Around them, the crowd had grown larger as word spread through the park that something serious was happening. Parents held their phones high, capturing every moment of the confrontation, while others live-streamed the events on social media platforms. "Furthermore," Diana continued, her voice taking on the measured cadence of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury, "your radio transmission contained demonstrably false statements about my husband's behavior and demeanor. You claimed he was uncooperative and threatening, when the video evidence clearly shows him attempting to de-escalate the situation while you escalated it through physical violence." Mrs. Patterson, the event coordinator, pushed through the crowd with several other volunteers, her face pale with shock and anger. "Officer Hendricks, Colonel Ellis has been volunteering with us for months. He's one of the most generous and kind-hearted people I know. He bought all the hamburgers and hot dogs for today's event with his own money, and he's been here since dawn helping set up. What on earth are you doing to him?" The testimony from Mrs. Patterson seemed to break something inside Hendricks, and she released Marcus's arm, as if it had suddenly become red hot. But instead of stepping back and admitting her mistake, she doubled down on her accusations with the desperate fury of someone who knew she was trapped but couldn't find a way out. "You're all lying," she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You're all part of some conspiracy to protect him. I saw what I saw. He was intimidating families, making threatening gestures, using his size to scare people. Just because he's got you all fooled doesn't mean I can't see what he really is." The naked prejudice in Hendricks's words sent a chill through the crowd, and several people began backing away from her, as if her hatred were contagious. Diana stepped closer to her husband, helping him to his feet, while keeping her phone trained on Hendricks, documenting every word of her increasingly unhinged rant. Marcus stood slowly, his hand pressed to his ribs, where the table edge had caught him, his face a mask of controlled anger and profound sadness. "Officer Hendricks," he said quietly, "I'm truly sorry that whatever happened in your life made you see me as a threat, when all I wanted to do was help feed hungry families. I hope someday you'll be able to see past whatever fear or hatred is driving you." The grace and dignity in Marcus's response seemed to shame even some of Hendricks's supporters in the crowd, but it only enraged her further. She reached for her radio again, her hands shaking as she called for additional backup, and demanded that the real police come to handle what she described as a coordinated effort to obstruct justice. The sound of sirens grew louder as actual police units responded to the escalating situation. But Diana was already 3 steps ahead of the game. She'd been sending text messages to contacts in the police department, the mayor's office, and the media, while simultaneously recording Hendricks's increasingly erratic behavior. Her phone buzzed with responses from reporters who'd been monitoring police scanners and were now racing to the scene. When the first police cruiser arrived, it was driven by Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran officer who'd worked with Diana on several cases and knew both her reputation and her commitment to justice. He took one look at the scene, a black man in volunteer clothing surrounded by supporting witnesses, facing off against a hysterical HOA officer who was demanding arrests, and immediately understood the dynamics at play. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, approaching with his hands visible and his body language calm. "I got your message. Can you fill me in on what happened here?" Diana provided a concise but comprehensive summary of the events, supported by testimony from witnesses and video evidence from multiple phones. Meanwhile, Hendricks continued to insist that Marcus was a dangerous criminal who'd somehow manipulated everyone at the event into supporting him through intimidation and threats. Sergeant Rodriguez listened patiently to all sides, examined the evidence, and spoke with witnesses before making his determination. "Officer Hendricks," he said finally, "based on the witness statements and video evidence, it appears you initiated physical contact with Mr. Ellis without justification. HOA officers have no authority to detain or arrest individuals, and your actions today constitute assault and possibly false imprisonment." The sergeant's words hit Hendricks like a sledgehammer, and she staggered backward as if she'd been physically struck. "But he was threatening people," she protested weakly. "I was just doing my job, protecting the community." "Ma'am," Sergeant Rodriguez said gently, "your job is to enforce HOA regulations, not to make arrests or use physical force against citizens. Based on what I've seen here today, I'm going to have to place you under arrest for assault and battery." As Hendricks was read her rights and led away in handcuffs, the crowd began to disperse, but the damage was done. Within hours, videos of the incident had gone viral on social media, shared thousands of times with hashtags like Justice for Colonel, and Yariho abuse. News crews arrived at the park to interview witnesses and piece together the story of how a charity barbecue had turned into a civil rights incident. The story exploded across social media platforms like wildfire, with the video of Hendricks assaulting Marcus while he tried to serve hamburgers to families generating millions of views within the first 24 hours. The stark contrast between Marcus's calm dignity and Hendricks's unhinged accusations created a powerful visual narrative that resonated with viewers across the country who'd witnessed similar incidents in their own communities. Major news networks picked up the story, running segments that explored the broader issues of HOA overreach and racial profiling in suburban communities. Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight as a symbol of grace under pressure, while Hendricks became the face of prejudice and abuse of authority. The Riverside Heights Homeowners Association faced intense scrutiny as residents demanded answers about how someone like Hendricks had been given authority to police their community. Diana worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with civil rights organizations and media outlets to ensure the story reached as wide an audience as possible. She understood that individual justice was important, but systemic change required public pressure and political action. Her office began investigating other complaints against Hendricks and the HOA, uncovering a pattern of discriminatory enforcement that had been flying under the radar for years. The investigation revealed that Hendricks had been targeting minority residents with disproportionate enforcement actions, issuing citations for minor infractions while ignoring similar violations by white residents. She'd been building what amounted to a harassment campaign against several families, using her position to make their lives miserable through constant complaints and threats of legal action. Marcus, meanwhile, struggled with the aftermath of the incident in ways that surprised even him. He'd faced enemy fire without flinching, led men through impossible missions, and earned decorations for valor under extreme conditions. But being humiliated in front of his neighbors while trying to serve food to hungry families had shaken him in ways that combat never had. "It's not about the physical assault," he told Diana one evening as they sat on their back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I've been hurt worse in training exercises. It's about being made to feel like I don't belong in my own community, like my service and my character mean nothing because of the color of my skin." Diana reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently as she struggled to find words that could heal the wounds that prejudice had carved in her husband's soul. "Your service means everything," she said softly. "Your character is beyond question. What happened today wasn't about you. It was about her fear and hatred. Don't let her poison take root in your heart." The city council called an emergency meeting to address the incident and the broader issues it had raised about HOA governance and accountability. The chambers were packed with residents, activists, and media representatives as city officials grappled with questions about oversight and civil rights protections in suburban communities. Marcus and Diana sat in the front row as speakers took the podium to share their own experiences with discriminatory enforcement and community harassment. The stories painted a picture of systematic abuse that had been hidden behind the veneer of community standards and property values. When Marcus was called to speak, he walked to the podium with the measured pace of a man who'd addressed troops before battle. The chamber fell silent as he adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces before him. "I didn't come here tonight to talk about myself," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I came to talk about the community I thought I was serving when I volunteered to flip hamburgers at a charity event. I came to talk about the neighbors who stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself. I came to talk about the children who shouldn't have to witness hatred disguised as authority." His speech, delivered without notes or theatrics, touched on themes of service, sacrifice, and the responsibility that comes with living in a diverse community. He spoke about his fellow veterans who died protecting the freedoms that people like Hendricks took for granted, and about the America they'd fought to defend, an America where character mattered more than color. "I don't want Officer Hendricks to be destroyed by this incident," Marcus said, as he concluded his remarks. "I want her to be educated. I want her to understand that the man she saw as a threat was actually trying to help. I want her to learn that service comes in many forms, and that sometimes the people who look different from us have the most to offer." The chamber erupted in applause as Marcus returned to his seat. But the real work was just beginning. The City Council voted unanimously to implement new oversight measures for HOAs, including mandatory training on civil rights and discrimination, regular audits of enforcement actions, and a civilian review board to investigate complaints. Hendricks was formally charged with assault and battery, but as part of a plea agreement, she accepted a sentence that included community service, sensitivity training, and a public apology. She was stripped of her enforcement authority and barred from holding any similar position in the future. The Riverside Heights Homeowners Association underwent a complete leadership change, with new board members committed to inclusive community building rather than exclusionary enforcement. They established a community outreach program and began hosting regular events designed to bring neighbors together across racial and economic lines. 6 months later, Marcus stood once again at a grill in Riverside Community Park. But this time, he was flanked by a diverse group of volunteers that included several police officers, city council members, and even some former supporters of Hendricks who'd been changed by the events they'd witnessed. The charity barbecue had become an annual tradition, with proceeds supporting veteran services and community relations programs. As he served hamburgers to a long line of families, Marcus caught sight of Diana speaking with a group of local reporters about the new community initiatives that had grown out of the incident. She looked up and smiled at him, and he felt the warmth of that smile heal another small piece of the wound that prejudice had carved in his heart. The ceremony that followed the barbecue was simple but profound. Mayor Johnson took the stage to present Marcus with the city's highest civilian honor, the Unity in Service Award, recognizing his grace under pressure and his commitment to community healing. As he accepted the award, Marcus looked out at the crowd and saw faces of every color and background, united in their rejection of hatred and their commitment to justice. "This award doesn't belong to me alone," Marcus said, holding the crystal trophy aloft. "It belongs to every person who stood up that day, every witness who spoke truth, every neighbor who chose love over fear. It belongs to a community that refused to let hatred define us." As the crowd dispersed and the sun set over Riverside Community Park, Marcus and Diana walked hand in hand toward their car, surrounded by the sound of children playing and families enjoying the evening together. The incident that had started with hatred and violence had been transformed through courage and community into something beautiful and lasting. The story of Colonel Marcus Ellis and Officer Patricia Hendricks had become more than just a news cycle. It had become a catalyst for change, a reminder that justice delayed is not justice denied, and a testament to the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary transformation when they stand together against injustice. In the end, the barbecue had served its purpose after all. It had fed hungry families, raised money for charity, and nourished the soul of a community that had learned to see past differences to the common humanity that bound them all together. The grill marks on those hamburgers had faded, but the marks left on the hearts of those who'd witnessed grace, triumph over hatred, would last forever.